Hello, and thank you for watching this video on the characters in Streets of Rage Remake. Yep, Streets of Rage Remake is a fan game that was 8 years in the making, and, well, it hasn't been out for quite 8 years, but it's been out for a while. I haven't found any character guides on it yet, so I thought I'd give it a try. So, we'll start with the first 3 default characters and see how it goes. I'd like to add that my assessments are from playing mostly in hard difficulty. Very Hard and Mania are definitely a huge step up, and I don't really feel qualified to describe how exactly one should play through those just yet. When a character has more than one version due to appearing in more than one Streets of Rage game, I'll usually start with the most recent version, tends to be Streets of Rage 3, and then work back to 1. Partially because that's the order in which you unlock them, and partially because the descriptions seem to just go smoothest that way. Alright, let's get started. All Streets of Rage characters have a set of moves that are accessed in the same way, although the details, of course, change considerably from one character to another. They have their basic standing combos, they have 2 kinds of jump attacks, one of which knocks down and the other keeps the enemy standing. They have normal dash attacks that are accessed through either stars or special manual inputs. You get stars by surviving and accruing a certain amount of points. Generally, doing these things manually is a bit more finicky and prone to error than just earning the star and doing the dash attack normally. So there are certain benefits to surviving. You also have at least 2 special attacks, one of which is your standard invulnerable clear-out move and another is usually more offensive in nature, and both draw from the same energy pool, either a gauge that slowly replenishes, or, if you prefer it, just dealing a little bit of damage to you. Though be careful about the gauge. If you use your special attack several times quickly, you take damage according to how much of the gauge is empty. So using it twice in a row quickly will take a big chunk off. Some characters also have dashing special attacks, and as for grapples, you usually get them by just moving up to an enemy, usually easier if you hold them in place with a jab first. And then you have the just dealing damage without breaking the grapple, your throws, and most characters can actually flip over and do a special throw from the back as well. Throughout the game you can find various weapons which the characters also wield differently. Some of the characters have dashing moves and even special moves depending on the weapons. I believe that just about covers the basics. Now let's move on to the specifics. Axel is about as close as the game gets to the main character of the series. He's been in every game, he's front and center in the artwork and the video game intros, so we'll start with him. Now, before I go into detail with Streets of Rage 3 Axel, I want to mention that Streets of Rage 3, although it goes with the same basic engine as Streets of Rage 2, the damage levels are overall lower, and so are enemy health bars, and at least the first part was translated faithfully into Remake, so bear that in mind. Now, Axel takes some work to use properly in his Streets of Rage 3 incarnation. He has short range on his jabs, his jump attacks are bad on purpose, his weapon use is slow although it has decent reach, and when he picks up a knife he only knows how to throw it. His grapple options are meh. In all incarnations it's always kind of below average. Where he shines is with his ground combos. Now, you need to put in some extra effort to make them work with Streets of Rage 3 Axel. The best way I found is to stop the enemy with a couple of jabs, which once again takes some extra effort learning enemy patterns because of your bad jab range, and then using your 2-star dash attack. I used the manual input for that one. The timing is tricky, but I find that the damage is very good, especially for this character. And his offense special, if you're in a bit of a pinch, like you caught an enemy with a jab but you're about to be surrounded, you can use his offensive clear out. Well, I should say just offensive special attack. Because the damage isn't amazing, but it is invulnerable from start to finish, so you get some safe damage out there. His normal clear out is quite fast. I've had no trouble hitting enemies with it. But I would say be really careful with his 3-star attack. I try not to use it much because it's really easy for Axel to be vulnerable afterwards because of that big uppercut that misses a lot of the time. Now, because of his short range, he has trouble disarming enemies as well. I tend to use a dash jump kick, although sometimes enemies just walk backward faster than you can dash forward, so you might have to push an enemy to the edge and have them forced to walk around you and catch them that way. So, Streets of Rage 2, Axel. It's much easier to get really deadly crown combos with this version. Just hit him a couple of times, then use your default dash attack. Grand Upper! I love doing that in the original Genesis version. It's lots of fun, I think. It really just shows Axel's style overall. You pretty much don't have to worry about the star attacks with that version. Now, his offensive... I beg your pardon. His offensive special is also very different in this version. It's just utter devastation. Like, I think it's the most damaging offensive special in the game. On the other hand, you are completely unsafe during the entirety of it. So you have to catch all of the enemies with it, or otherwise be in a really safe position, because otherwise you'll get punched in the back of the head. And you might even have to use another clear out special to get out, which will take out a big chunk of your life bar just from the burnout. So you have to play carefully and really look for opportunities where you can put some punishment on one or two enemies. I would like to mention that Axel also has trouble with enemies that block a lot because he depends on multiple hits, and that can be tough, and especially on enemies that have clear outs, so you might have to use some quick grapple options just to be safe there. Also, Streets of Rage 2 is not as good with weapons as Streets of Rage 3 version, so you're going to have even more trouble disarming enemies, so good luck. Now, Streets of Rage 1, that's a fairly interesting incarnation, and it's pretty much made from scratch, because all the sprites and the full set of moves have to be reworked. A lot of the options that you have in Streets of Rage 2 and 3 aren't in 1, so they had to just make them. So great job on the makers of Streets of Rage Remake. So, Streets of Rage 1 Axel. He has better range on his basic moves like his jabs, a better pipe and sword animation, although slightly slower. His jump attack is even worse, and once again this is by design. In the original it was even written by the, well, character intro that it's his biggest weakness. His flying knee just does not reach things very well. His offense special is a fairly interesting case. It doesn't quite have the extreme damage of his Streets of Rage 2 version, but it has better reach, and more importantly it has much faster execution, so you can get that damage out much more reliably. Oh, and thanks to the bad jump attack, he has even more trouble disarming enemies. So, especially if you're going with the Streets of Rage 1 route, where the enemies know their armed attacks really well, you're gonna have some trouble. I think that's about it for Axel. Blaze is what I would call the secondary main character of the series. She's not quite as prominent in the artwork, but she was in all three of the games. Blaze is a character who likes to control the fight at mid-range and punish people who get close with her powerful grapple options. Her Streets of Rage 3 version has fairly good jab range, fairly slow weapon attacks, but they have fairly good range as well, and her sword dash is especially notable. She can grab enemies at the end to avoid damage to her weapon through a bug. Her normal dash attack is also an interesting mid-range option. It has a bit of a slow startup, but it can usually land her first hit fairly reliably. Her jump attacks are okay. Her forward jump has a really long hitbox but low power. It is useful for disarming enemies or just clearing out and getting yourself some room. Her neutral jump has better attack power. Her grapple options are fairly strong, especially for an overall low-power character. Her suplex option is especially good, and she carries it through all three versions. Her star dash attacks have to be placed fairly carefully. 2 stars is close range enough so that it's good as a combo ender. It hits behind her as well, keeping her safe. Her 3-star travels forward quite a bit and will often not land all of the hits if it's placed improperly. Although, if you're up against a wall or the edge of the screen, you can land all the hits very easily for really good damage. Her clear out is, well, it's fairly standard. It hits fast, at least in front of her. And her offense special is pretty versatile. It has good range, it's fully invulnerable, damage is okay, although her 2-star is better. In Streets of Rage 2, she's overall similar. Her offensive special is more situational. It deals a ton of damage at the start of its animation and less damage as it progresses. It's very good as a combo ender where you can almost always get the full damage. It also deals its damage in a single hit, which is really useful for enemies that like to use clear-out attacks. Her default dash attack is much worse than in Streets of Rage 3 for most purposes. That's because one of its early hits was added in 3. Now its startup is slower, and it often triggers anti-air moves, especially from bosses. Her heavy weapon swings are not bad at all. In fact, I think she has more reach than Streets of Rage 3. Her dagger combo in both 2 and 3 is fairly short range. It can technically hit further away with 2 of its 3 hits, but it's unsafe at that range. Her dash attack with the knife is fairly powerful, but getting there is kinda tough. And her special is, I'd say it's kind of like a clear-out attack that uses up the dagger but doesn't consume your energy. Streets of Rage 1 Blaze is kind of an odd character. Her jabs are great, if possible even better than her other incarnations. Really good range, and her basic combo, while it doesn't deal amazing damage, it's pretty fast and I find it to be reliable. And you'll need that help because some of her other moves have taken kind of a hit, especially her star moves. Her 2-star doesn't hit behind her anymore, making it less reliable for combos, and her 3-star I think deals less damage overall. Her normal dash attack seems roughly the same as Streets of Rage 2, with the decent damage but also all the other problems. And be careful if you pick up a pipe with her, because her animation is really slow in this version. Even though there's a few frames, I often found myself getting hit before it reached its hitting enemies part. Aside from that, her offensive special executes faster but deals less damage, and I think her grapples have been powered up a little bit. I find that this character is worth it just because she looks so stylish, in my opinion. I mean, I really like her fighting stance, just her jacket. I think she's a lot of fun to play. And I think that just about sums it up for Blaze. Oh my god, they brought back Adam. Adam was lots of fun to use in Streets of Rage 1, and then he never showed up in Streets of Rage again as a playable character. So much disappoint, so much sorrow. But Streets of Rage Remake brought him back, and they had to give him a complete rework because of all of the engine differences and new move options that they'd have to give him. I think they did an excellent job with this guy. I really have to give them a lot of credit for this. Adam was only in Streets of Rage 1, so he only has one version, but there's a lot to talk about. He has amazing reach on all of his moves, his jabs included, of course. His basic combo is not amazing damage-wise, but it has some interesting utility. If you time it right so that your final kick hits the opponent while it's still in the air, it'll fly across the screen and knock down any enemy it contacts, which gives you some extra room to breathe. He has superb use of pipes and knives, which are all over the place, especially in Streets of Rage 1 levels. And he has some useful special attacks with the pipe, even a special move that does a lot of damage and hits behind you as well. Although, his knife move is more for show than anything else because it has the same kinds of problems as Blaze's dash attack from 2 and 1. He gets some really good reach with his normal knife stabs though. His specials are probably his biggest weak point. His clear out is slow to come out and enemies will often move out of the way before they can get knocked down by it. His offensive special is not too bad. It has some startup invulnerability and the damage is okay, but I find it more of a survival move than a dedicated damage move. His dash special is a lot of fun. I like to use it on enemies that are getting up, but when things are tough, you're probably better off saving it for more survival-oriented uses. It is fully invulnerable though. Now, his dash attacks. Oh boy. All of his dash attacks are useful. His jump kick is really nice just as a mid-range poke, a way to get a knockdown, and if used in a combo and it gets all its hits, its damage is pretty good too. His 2-star dash punch is really nice for clearing out the room and getting some space. It probably won't knock anything out, but it'll get a lot of knockdowns, and it can hit pretty much across the entire screen. And his 3-star is sort of a mid to long range high damage attacks for when you can sort of see where the enemy is gonna be. It's probably his highest damage single move, except maybe his offense special. And it's really safe to use too, especially if you have the hit pause set to Streets of Rage 3 mode. It just, his grapple options are also really nice. He retains the Streets of Rage 1 suplex, which is a really nice thing to have. So that's the main thing you're going to use for damage in close quarters. So overall, he uses his long-range moves to sort of keep the enemy on, well, I would say on their toes, but more like on their backs, and then use his overhead jump attack to get his grapple started, and wow, I'm just still really happy that they have Adam, and I plan to use him a lot. So I think that's it for the first video. I hope you'll stick around for the second one. I'll try to get that up as soon as I can. Later.